Hey, everyone. Thank you for coming. Really excited to give this talk today. New York's my hometown, so this is very special for me. And I want to talk to you about the new rules of UX writing. I got one woo for New York. Amazing. A lot of woos. All right, a lot of woos. First, a little bit about me. I've been working as a writer in digital product design for a long time with lots of big companies with thousands of employees, at agencies in-house, and I've worked for very small startups with literally 2 employees. I was number 2. So everything that I'm going to show you is based on things that I've learned or I've done. I'm really excited to share it with all of you. And I'm going to show you a lot of examples, because I think that's the best way to learn what writing can do. I work on digital design teams, but I'm not a designer. I'm a writer. And you might be wondering, like, why would I need a writer to build software? Why would my design team need a writer? For a long time, companies didn't have writers. You can tell. We saw interfaces that looked like this. Not just badly written, but not written. It wasn't just Windows. It wasn't just error messages. The entire interface of a lot of early software was just loaded with text that didn't really do anything, wasn't clear, wasn't helpful, wasn't thought through. Now, of course, we've moved forward, and now we see interfaces that look like this. A lot has changed. And it's not just the grid and the design systems, not the corner radius, it's not the colors, it's all of that, it's the code, but it's also the words and the writing. So I want to talk about how we got here and where we can go next. The reason this screen is better is because for a long time as writers, we focused on these 3 words. These are sort of the holy trinity of UX writing: simple, clear, and concise. Now, these are important, but I also think they're incomplete, because we know that writing can be a lot more than this. Writing can make you feel something. It can surprise you. It can make you happy or annoy you or frustrate you. And that's what I want to share. How do we get beyond just like, let's make this clear and simple and short so the header doesn't wrap to a 3rd line? And how do we actually get a little bit smarter about what writing can do in interfaces? So I'm going to show you what I'm calling the new rules of UX writing. It's how to move beyond, make it as short as possible. Rule number 1, define your audience. Now, every interface starts with a blank page. Every time you write anything, you start with a blank page. This is our version of the sheet of paper in the typewriter. I think we all know intuitively that you need to know who you're writing for before you write. If I were to hand you a card and say, hey, it's your mom's birthday, fill this out, everyone here could do it. And then if I were to tell you, I said mom, I meant boss. Ooh, hope you used a pencil, because it's going to be really weird to hand that to your boss. We know this intuitively, and yet sometimes we forget it as writers. The challenge for defining your audience is the instinct is to go big, right? Like you want 1 billion users, you want to scale, and so your audience gets really vague. So let's build a fake app together. Let's build an app that lets people stream movies. The instinct is to go very broad. Let's write for people who like movies. OK, so we've narrowed it down to everyone ever. Not entirely helpful. And it's not helpful because it doesn't give us anything to write or design against. But what if we were to sharpen it? Instead of people who like movies, it's something like film obsessives. Now, maybe you are this person, or maybe you know this person. Writing for a film obsessive is very different than writing for people who like movies. It gives us an opportunity to think about what content do we want to display. So if you're just designing for people who like movies, maybe you include the star rating. If you're writing for film obsessives, they don't care what strangers on the internet think about an important American film. You don't need to include the star rating. But maybe you do need to include the director, the cinematographer, the editor. Defining your audience helps you decide, what do we charge and what's our product roadmap? If you like movies, maybe you spend $10, $20 a month. If you're obsessed with movies, you'll spend more. And you care about things like director's commentary or special 4K restorations or new audio tracks. Defining your audience influences what you write, but also just what you build in the first place. Maybe it's the way you organize content. Every streaming app, right, has the trending, new releases, popular now. If you're obsessed with films, maybe you don't care about that. You're looking to push yourself. See something else. See classic films, Japanese cinema. It could even influence what platform we're building on in the first place. We could decide film obsessives don't need this mobile app we're designing, because they only watch things on big TVs. And they calibrate their sound systems, and the colors look good. Defining your audience is the first step. Before you write, figure out who you're writing for. OK, now let's actually start writing. Rule 2, choose good words. Words are the backbone of good writing. Maybe you're selling something on your website. What do you call it? There's lots of ways to describe the things I'm wearing on my feet right now. Is it about fashion, performance, style? You need to decide what's right for you. That's always, whenever somebody asks me, like, is this writing good? My answer is, annoyingly, it depends. I need to know who you're writing for, what's the strategy, where are you going? Or maybe you've got a feature in your app, that little heart for every song. What do you call that feature? Is it liked songs? Or maybe something stronger, like loved songs. Maybe you just want to have some fun, call it My Jams. That's valid too. I've worked a lot in the telecommunication space. You can tell the screen all the way to the left was written by my client at a big telecom provider, can't you? Because no one has ever used the phrase mobile device when talking about their phone. And so when I was working with them, I helped them understand, like, people don't talk about your product that way. This is a screen where you'd switch providers and you'd get a free cell phone. They're all doing this now. It's the only way people switch. Instead of add a mobile device, maybe we just make it like more normal sounding. Add a cell phone, that's the bare minimum. Or maybe we find an opportunity to remind people you're getting this brand new thing that normally costs $1,000. And that's where the voice comes through. Add your shiny new phone. Of course, if you're building a social network, you need to figure out what's the relationship between all these people. Do you follow them? Are you friending them? Do you like their page? Have you hearted their updates? All these little things are sort of functionally similar. You press a button and you see their content, but the relationship is actually very, very different. That's what writing can do. It can explain what's the interaction we're going for and how should you be thinking about this. Now, clear, simple, concise. Those are the 3 words we always think about as writers. But I think we have to go beyond that. So here are 3 buttons that all do the same thing. They agree to spend $20 a month on something. If all you care about is being simple, clear, and concise, join is the obvious winner because it's clear and simple and concise. But maybe it's not right for you. Maybe it's more like subscribe, because we know what a subscription is. Users know that they pay a fee every month, they can pause it, they can cancel it. Or maybe you want to feel a little bit more expensive and premium. Become a member. You subscribe to a magazine, but you become a member of an exclusive club. Even figuring out, like, how do we want people to think about this interaction? Words can shape that too. Maybe there's some issue in your home. Your mirror broke, or a pipe burst, or something's going on with your deck, and you need to find someone to fix it. How do we want users to think about that? It could just be about expertise. Find an expert. I need someone who really knows what they're doing. Maybe it's all about speed, like in the middle. My pipe burst, my place is going to flood. I need someone here as soon as possible. I don't care if they're an expert. I need someone with a wrench who can get here and fix it. Or maybe you need to have some combination of proximity and professionalism. Find a nearby pro. I need someone who's close, who understands my neighborhood, my city, but I also need a professional, someone who's licensed and bonded, not a guy with a wrench. It's not about speed. I need someone who's close and a professional. I think what's really interesting about exploring writing this way with 3 screens next to each other is you start to see, like, hey, again, these all do the exact same thing, but the framing is very different for the user. Rule number 3, respect your reader. Now, I talk about respect a lot as a writer, and I think it's super important, and it can take many forms. Respect could be just the way you say hello. Is a loading screen an opportunity to be more than a loading screen? So instead of that bar filling up, could it say, welcome back, Kate? Say hello, a little friendlier, introduce the person's first name, but also signal, we know it's you, you're back, and we're going to give you a personalized experience. Respect is recognizing what can we communicate and when. Respect also means just letting people fix stuff. Now, I showed you that Windows example. The whole thing was a nightmare, let's agree. But the most annoying was maybe that little OK button. So you're supposed to read that little string of text and then hit OK, acknowledged. We still see parts of the web that do that only let you acknowledge an issue. And the one on the left with an expired credit card, you can already see in your head what that flow is going to look like, right? I need to go into settings, payments, not that card, hold on, it's not labeled, let me pull out my wallet. Respect can mean just letting people fix things or do things they want to do, not having to dig through settings to figure out what's wrong. Another one, as apps and interfaces just take over more and more of our life, they start to get into the places that we're normally pretty private about. Income, mental health, medicine. That's going to keep happening. So every time you go to a doctor, you're going to have to use an iPad for the rest of your life. How do you do that in a way that's respectful? that recognizes privacy, also maybe acknowledges the awkwardness, and gives a good reason for asking a question. It's weird to go up to someone and say, "What's your annual income?" Like, no one here would do that. But if you have a good reason, it doesn't feel as weird, right? The one on the right explains, "We need this information so we can help you." It's okay to ask these kinds of things and get personal, but sometimes it helps to explain why. Respect can also just be like the way you write in general. Okay, let's read the one on the left and then feel bad about ourselves for a minute. Confused about investing? We'll explain everything in words you can actually understand. So you read that and you're like annoyed at whoever wrote this. It was me, I wrote it. But I did it to make a point. I didn't say I was confused. And what do you mean words I can understand? You think I'm dumb, don't you? Writing with respect means reframing that kind of language. New to investing? I am new. And we'll explain everything with zero jargon. It's not that you're dumb or confused. It's just that other companies write in ways that are obtuse and clunky and unclear on purpose, and we don't do that. Respect means writing clearly, but also recognizing your reader is as smart as you are. How do you phrase things that way? Respect can mean letting people skip stuff. Every app wants you to update every 45 minutes these days. We all know that sometimes you use your phone and you're at work, or you're doing something else and you don't have time to update it. Maybe you don't want this feature at all, and that's okay too. Instead of forcing someone into a flow, letting them skip it. Respect can also mean just slowing things down in general. As designers, we're always looking for ways to make things simpler and faster and easier. Should it be easy to drop out of college, or drain your retirement account, or send all your money to a stranger you just met on a dating app? No, of course not. These things are ridiculous. Respect can mean, sure, making things possible and simple and easy, but also putting in some guardrails where it makes sense. Something like this: you're about to spend $1,200 on a flight. It's non-refundable, do you know that? There's lots of ways to explain to a user, like, hey, be careful, are you sure you want to do this? Here's just 3, a simple alert on the left, a question in the middle, or maybe a little check mark to acknowledge, hey, here's what's going on. I always think about, are we respecting the user by making things easier? Or are we respecting them by maybe just making sure what they're getting into? Because sometimes adding friction is the answer. Rule 4, information. Boy, restaurant websites are the worst at this, aren't they? You get to a restaurant website and you see the navigation on the left. Italian spot looks great. Let's read about their story and their nonna. They got some good reviews. Contact us. There's an email inbox we don't monitor. Good luck. Try to get in touch. By the way, we're on Instagram. The reason the website on the left doesn't work is because it forgets who it's for. The person who's hungry and is trying to figure out where to eat and go spend time in that restaurant. They want to know, what do you serve? When are you open? Where are you? Let me make a reservation. Now, to be fair, there's a version that's sort of in the middle of these two. You can have the information, you can link to reviews, you can show your social media accounts, but that's not all you can do. People need information, and we need to consider, why are they there in the first place? The one on the left is for us. The one on the right is for the users. Sometimes information is just playback. This is the chance to make sure I've entered my address correctly, or I've booked the correct flight. This is that button before you actually pay for something. How do we let people make sure they haven't made a mistake or a typo? Ooh, the other most annoying thing on the internet. The world is overloaded with this kind of growth hacky nonsense, right? We have a deal, but you need to click through this email because we're not going to show it to you. There's something special waiting just for you. In my experience, stuff on the left has never worked. Never. It's a great way to increase bounce rates. It's a great way to get people to sign up for emails and then immediately mark them as spam and tank all your metrics. And yet people are still doing it. If you're selling something on the internet, please, 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 as a personal favor, show the price. That's all people want to know. You don't need to hide it. It doesn't work. Maybe it's not price. Maybe it's something else. We all agree to go see a movie together. I get to a page that says showtimes, and it doesn't show the showtimes. Everything's hidden behind a click. Who here has seen this kind of thing, right? This happens all the time on the web. You get more page views, you get more clicks, The metrics are all out of sync, and it's an infuriating experience. Sometimes giving information just means bringing it forward. So it's not hidden behind a click anymore. Here are the show times. Oh, and by the way, if one of them is sold out, we'll tell you right away. No one should enter in payment information and then realize, you know what, not here, can't buy it. It could also be setting expectations. So you go on, you buy tickets. Every ticket vendor has their own experience, right? Do I need to download the app? You gonna email me the PDF? What if I want to resell this? Are there refunds? Instead of doing that old technical, here's a vague confirmation code, best of luck, explaining to the user what happens next. You've finished why you're here, you've bought your thing. Okay, but the event hasn't happened yet. So what are you going to do that morning where you need to find your ticket? Information could be secondary too. Let's say you need to find a doctor. How do you choose a doctor? Do you care where your doctor went to medical school? Maybe. I know every doctor hangs their degree on their office. I have no idea where any of my doctors went to medical school. But it matters to them. Does it matter to me, the user? Again, maybe, I think probably not. Maybe you need to know how long they've been practicing. It could go either way. I want someone who's been doing this for 30 years, or I want someone maybe who's a little bit younger, who's maybe closer to my age, who went to medical school within the last 10 years. They've been trained on the more recent developments. Could be neither of those. It could just be, hey, I've signaled that I'm a Japanese speaker. I need someone who speaks Japanese. All of these could work. It just depends on your audience and your product. Next rule is finding moments to add voice. I think what's tough about writing things that are only simple and clear and concise is that they can really feel soulless, right? We've all been on apps or on websites that feel like they're sort of vague and floating there and they don't have a point of view. There's lots of ways to write every screen. So let's go back to our movie app. We need to know, do you like scary movies or not? We could just ask you, into scary movies, yes or no? Or we could give you another opportunity. How do you feel about scary movies? Love them or not for me? Or we could build a different voice. Want something scary, but scary, scary? Bring it on, or please no. And you can see how it gets a little, excuse the word, voicier from left to right. Both of these on the back end on the algorithm do the same thing, right? They just signal, are we going to show horror or not show horror? But they do it in different ways. It might just be the way you're introducing your product in the first place. So you're selling subscription coffee. How do you want to frame that to users? It could just be energy, kickstart, strong stuff. This is all about waking up and getting after your day. Or maybe it's all about the worldliness, the romance. There are some people who care what country their coffee came from and what kind of coffee it is. Peru, Arabica. Maybe it's neither of those. It's the benefit of our product is its subscription. You don't have to think about it. Automate your mornings. Just different ways into the same product. This is what writing can do. Even tiny parts of your product are an opportunity. Does your app just have a legal footer? It's okay, but is that an opportunity to say something about who we are, where we're from, where we stand for? It isn't just the name of our company and the fact that we're registered in New York State. It's, hey, we're 3 friends doing this locally. Or we think you should recycle this can once you're done with it. A single word can do it. You're going through ordering food. You have to order a side dish. How do we even talk about the side dish? It's popular. Lots of people order this. Or maybe it's seasonal. It'll change in 3 months. It uses whatever we found at the farmer's market that looked good that day. Or maybe it's homemade. Remind people you're using an app, but there's a person with a knife who's actually making this. Look, there's lots of ways to write every screen. And that's the challenge of getting beyond clear, concise, simple, all that make it as short as possible stuff that we sometimes face as writers. You want to mute something for a day? What do you say? Snooze, mute? Is it 24 hours? Till tomorrow? When I'm working on a project, I take a screen like this and I think, how do I write this 10 different ways, 50 different ways? And then start to think about what feels like us, what feels like our brand, like our product, like it communicates with our users the way we need it to. I was working on an e-commerce site a few years ago, and we had add to cart right in the middle, and it was really bothering me. And we kept bringing it up. I kept bringing it up every meeting. This feels wrong, but I can't explain why. And then it was during COVID, so I went in person, and I realized, you guys don't have shopping carts here. That's why it feels weird. Add to cart is for Costco and toilet paper. You're a cool clothing boutique. You should do add to bag. And it feels really small, right? But it does set the expectation, and it does help build a brand, all these tiny little moments of voice. Rule 6, delete what you can. So do your best to squint and not read any of this. You can already tell the one on the right is simpler, but like we looked at before, maybe the text has a good reason for being there. It doesn't. I can tell you. It says, are you ready? Let us know by choosing one of the options below, or you can go back and make changes. Well, of course. Like, do we need to explain that? I don't think so. As a writer, I'm always looking like, what can we cut and what words actually need to be there? Writing always needs a purpose. Or how about this? In case you don't know what the word trending means, we'll explain the word trending. Now, there's a place for toasts and pop-ups. Onboarding is complicated. I'm not saying never do this, but do it intelligently. Respect your user and know that the text you're adding in there better not get in the way or annoy people. It better not speak down to them. You don't need to explain the word trending. And then there's just products that like don't need extra text. I've worked on a lot of these. Does a map need more words on it? Probably not. A calendar, like where would you even add words on the calendar interface? And if your product is more a mechanism for delivering content, I think the content strategy is important, the brand voice is important, but it comes through in the photography style, the way you write headlines, the sections, what we cover. Writing can shape the product, but adding words to the actual UI is not going to help. Sometimes it just means getting rid of stuff. All of these screens could work for different reasons. Oh, that's cool, you're searching 10,000 restaurants. Oh, in the middle, that's kind of fun, has a playful voice. Or maybe this lasts 50 milliseconds. We don't need to add words here. It'll be over before we have a chance to read. What I do as a writer on a design team is figuring out how do the words and the actual interface work together. So we talked about calendar drop-downs earlier in Brad's talk. You ever have to do that for your birthday? And you need to go through and figure out what day of the week was I born on and click through? Yeah, the reason the one on the right is wrong and bad is because it isn't relevant. You can type your birthday in 2 seconds without having to click back 40 years. That said, sometimes you do want the component on the right? We're booking a reservation. I know my friend's birthday is on the 17th. I have no idea what day of the week that is. Now I do need a calendar. It's all about marrying writing and component, making the interface work as a whole. Or just pulling up the right keyboard. Like, what's your phone number? Phone numbers are numbers, obviously. Let's not have people click through to get the right keyboard. Or playing with interface. You want to decide how spicy you want something. I've shown you a lot of buttons here, but there's lots of different interaction patterns and UIs you can explore. You could just choose how spicy you want it. Maybe it's a fun slider. Maybe it's input. You tell the chef exactly what you want. All of these can work. And they're all very different. This is where writing and components need to work together. Rule 8, defining your worldview. You're going to have to choose your worldview as a designer, as a human being. I mean, first you're going to have to choose a language, and that's a worldview. Who are we writing for? What language do they speak? Or something like this. What sizing do we show? We see this in fashion a lot, right? Our company is headquartered in California, but we're European. And we're going to make it feel European by doing European sizing. Or something like this, what's your age? Now this feels clear, simple, and concise, but let's hang on this for a minute and talk about what it's really saying. So as I go through this, I think, all the way at the top, if you're under 18, you don't count. You're not supposed to be here. Is anyone right on the cusp? Like, you don't have to raise your hand, but if you're exactly 45, we think you're more like a 54-year-old than a 44-year-old. And if you're 56, might as well be 96. Sometimes interfaces feel really simple, but this does have a point of view about how we think about age and how we think about people. I've got one of those Italian last names with a big capital L. Who else had their last name underlined their entire life growing up with red squiggles like this, right? This says to the user, your name is wrong. That is a really weird worldview to have. And then there's interfaces like this, not just annoying or weird, but hateful, anti-trans, mean, ignorant. This says to the user, we only think these kinds of people can use our product. This is how we think about gender. That's how you should think about gender. There are real serious issues we're going to have to contend with as designers. Of course, there are opportunities too. When we have a component like a search bar, we could just say search, and that's fine. You're looking for books. Or we could do something like in the middle. Our search tool is really powerful. It's not just author name or book title, but you can search by genre. Or on the right, we could have a point of view. You've read enough books by white men. We think you should try books by black women. It's an opportunity. Everything you design or do reflects who you are and what you think. This feels really simple, right? If you sell internationally, you're going to have to decide how you feel about what's going on in the South China Sea. It's wild, right? But it's true. This is a headline from a little over a year ago. Bulgaria apologizes to China for listing Taiwan as a country. Now, it's hard to overstate how remarkable this is to me. We have a global luxury giant apologizing to a government over their checkout flow. But it's true. You're going to have all these opinions, and they're going to have to come through in your product. And as a writer, there's only so much that you can do. I always say that writing can't fix you being a bad person or having a bad design. And sometimes when I'm brought into projects, it's let's fix the words, but not the interface itself. That doesn't work. I can show you. Here, there's a company that wants to be all about inclusivity. The headline does that. It's designed for all bodies. And if you only read the headline, it kind of works, right? That could work on a print ad. If you look at the sizes, you're designed for 2 bodies, small and medium. Or how about this? Joining is easy. This sure feels easy. Enter an email. Wait a second. There's the eyebrow, step 1 of 29. Making things easy is not the same as making things seem easy or feel easy. This is an awful design, and we know that. Or one more, my least favorite design pattern on the internet. The headline says, this is free. The internet says, no, it's not. You're going to have to pay for this. That's where writing and design need to work together. Writing alone does not fix bad interfaces, or ignorance, or hate, or awful design. Writing is design. Words and UI patterns need to work together. So the last rule is this: write for people. We talked a lot about starting with this empty page, this blank slate. And I think it's true. This really is where I start. Figuring out, who am I writing for? What do they need? Are they distracted, going to be angry? What do they care about? But maybe it's more important to take a step back. It's not about the screen, it's about the person on the other end. Writing for an actual human being who's complex and has emotions and needs. That's why clear, simple, concise writing isn't always enough. Because it's written for users, but what we need to do is write for people. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. So to join me for a little conversation.
Let's do it.
Like all the examples, I mean, we want them all. We want them all, I'm sure. So many questions, and I think when I was looking at it, there's indeed so much difference, like in just a little tiny thing. Like actually, it was really quite impactful for me just to see add to cart and add to back. That indeed does feel different. Although if you actually have a conversation about it in, in a big meeting with stakeholders or whatever, they will be questioning, does it really matter? And so one of the questions that came up very quickly right here. Well, no, it was not deleted now, was it? No. All right, here we go. Alien. An alien is wondering,
okay,
how do you communicate the value of content towards technical people and stakeholders, especially product managers, uppercase, sales, right? But also marketing, legal, risk. They all want a stake in the wars. Who compromises?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple ways to do that. First, you can send them a recording of this talk and CC me on the email. I do think that showing the same screen written different ways is a way to understand it. And that's kind of why I formatted my talk like this. I think you asked earlier, is anyone here a writer? I don't think any hand went up, but you all understood what I was talking about. You're all smart enough to realize, though I'm not a professional writer, oh yeah, those things are different. So I found that that's a really helpful way. Like, look, here's what your app looks like now. Here's what it could look like. I've also found, like, I know it can be tough to fight for resources everywhere, but especially on design teams. hire someone for 3 months, for 6 months. See, like, hey, let's just try this out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But in my experience, 9 times out of 10, it's, oh, how did we ever not have someone who was focused on the words because the interface is 80% words? Of course we need this resource. So I think it's, yeah, writing the same screen a couple different ways and then seeing if there's a way to like just bring on someone for a little bit and see the value by integrating them into your design team.
Mm. But then who owns words? Murat is wondering how much of UX writing falls under the responsibility of the design system team compared to product teams?
Yeah, so it's always a mix of both. And then there's the marketing team, which we also haven't talked about. In general, I found that it works to be more aligned with the design team. Of course, influenced by product, for sure. Like, we're all on the same team working together at the end of the day. But the reason I say design is because a lot of the words need to work in the interface. I've shown you some examples where you can answer the product brief, and then you get to the actual UI of what you've designed, and you're like, oh, this actually doesn't make sense anymore, because whatever component we're using doesn't fit, or this language doesn't this language doesn't make sense. So I have always found more success having writing as part of the design team than the product team.
Mm-hmm. Brendan is asking, how do you apply these exercises for applications developed in multiple languages? How can I convince our linguistics team to do some of these exercises with or without us?
Yeah, my English is very good. My everything else is very bad. So what I usually do is get everything perfect in English, and then the truth about short, simple writing is it's just easier to translate, right? Like, you can hit Google Translate on join, and you get the right word. If you hit Google Translate on become a member, it's like, well, like, there's nuance to French. It's not really that kind of membership, so that's really tricky. I still think that it's best to have a person specialize in that language. I realize lots of smaller companies can't afford that, but there's so much nuance to language itself that I personally make the English very, very good, but I'm not the person to write in anything else.
Okay. A concerned citizen makes his or her or their appearance again. How do you see the role of UX writer changing with AI? And how do you use AI in your work, like to design voice and tone, mapping, or something similar?
Yeah, so right now, I personally do not use it a lot in my workflows. I think it's good for looking stuff up. My opinion, where the tools are now, is the writing is bad. It's also scarily not terrible. It's a solid B-, which I do not think is good enough. So I use AI. Yeah, we can clap for that. What will that look like in 10, 15, 30 years? I don't know. But right now, I think we all know this, right? You all have used ChatGPT. It feels like that kind of weird, soulless, voiceless Wikipedia language, where you're it's factually kind of true, but it lacks the nuance and subtlety of actual writing. Again, tools are getting better, so ask me again in 5 years how my workflows have changed.
On the optimistic side of things, Brian is wondering, do you have any tips for giving users bad news?
I think it's acknowledging that this news is bad and then pivoting to a solution as soon as possible. So flights get delayed, give people the information they need. I know I as a user am firmly of the more information is always better. I think people get extra frustrated when it's, your order is delayed, we'll get in touch at some point. Your order is delayed, we'll let you know an update every 24 hours. Your flight's delayed, but it's leaving at 6 instead of 5. Rather than that sort of vague, we're sorry, we hope you feel okay. People get frustrated and annoyed about stuff. So give them a clear, honest description of what's going on and then what to expect going forward. But it's tough. Bad news is always going to be bad news. And your app, even if your voice is friendly and fun, sometimes awful things happen and you need to be able to write about them.
I think it's interesting when I look at the questions that there's a lot of maybe not necessarily confusion, but just this feeling of everything overlaps and it's not very clear, so who is going to own the words? So Sophia is wondering, so what's really the difference between content designer and UX writer? Also in terms of tasks, roles, responsibilities.
Yeah, I kind of use those words interchangeably. I usually, if you were to ask me at a party, what do you do? I'd usually just say I'm a writer or I'm a UX writer. Content design and UX writing are very, very similar. I think they're sort of used interchangeably. I know different teams have different names for what they do. In my head, UX writing, I think, more firmly focuses on the user and the user needs. Content design feels more what are we actually displaying on the page, and what sort of, it was almost like the example of the of the new site that I was showing. Like, what are we showing? What's our editorial strategy? What is the content coming forward? That said, like, we don't have a perfect word for what I do, and I acknowledge that, which is why I usually just say, I'm a writer and I work on interfaces and hope nobody asks a follow-up question.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many questions. I think at this point, what I'm really curious about is like when you think about the process from the very start till the end. So you mentioned already that you're going to probably do some research and what is the audience, what are we trying to communicate, but also eventually you need to get to this understanding about how we want to be perceived in terms of like brand, and it must be playing probably with colors, with typography and all of that. And so the words on their own, they're never kind of alone. They're supporting or they're informing or they're shaping the visual language then as well. And I'm wondering, so how does the process look like? When do you actually start thinking about words? Is it something we start with and then we think about the colors, typography and so on?
I think so. That's usually how I start, and that's how I've been most successful, is like, let's come into the process early and figure out what is our brand, what do we stand for, what are we trying to do? For a couple of reasons. One, I showed you those sort of funny examples at the end. Like, if the design and the interface is bad, writing is not going to fix that. You can't just rewrite a headline and make the design work. But I also think in figuring out the brand voice and the way we write, you're able to make a lot of smart decisions about what you're designing in the first place. So like that coffee example, we showed you that one in the middle, if you remember, it said Peru's most flavorful Arabica. Okay, so these people care about where their coffee comes from. There's probably going to be a map somewhere in the product. If it was that other version, automate your mornings, like, that person doesn't want a map. We absolutely are not going to have that on the interface. So figuring out from the beginning, like, who's our audience, what are we designing for, how do we want to show up in the world, lets us make really smart decisions about what is the product even going to look like in the first place. But bringing in a writer late and saying, like, hey, proofread this, add a voice, it's not always that simple.
And how does it then fit with personalization? If you think about like defining the sort of voice and tone and the words, and then you should start thinking, plugging in maybe AI. That's a question that Amy is raising. And you maybe have some customer data, and you know the preferences, and you maybe know a few things about them, and you want to communicate something to them in a profound, like depending on the level of expertise as well, in a different way. So it might, I mean, in my world, that would be really complicating this landscape of voice and tone mapping. How do you say when, what, with error messages, with welcome, with onboarding, and all of that? How does it then work at all with customization or personalization?
Yeah, with personalization, it's always tricky, because I think we all know, like, personalization can be really good and really weird. I know, like, on my birthday every year, I'll get like a coupon from Nike for 10% off, but then my orthodontist will email me also, happy birthday. And I'm like, I know you know my birthday, why are you emailing me? This is weird. So I'd consider, like, what is the actual user benefit to giving this sort of personalization? And then also importantly, like, have people opted into this? Did they even ask for customized deals or personalized experience? Because it's okay to, like, be a logged in user who gets all this stuff, and it's also okay to not have that or not want that. I think where the weirdness comes in is when you get something that's personalized for you and you don't see any real benefit and you never consented to it in the first place. That's where it gets really tricky.
Okay, well, I have to bring up this question.
Uh-oh.
John H.
John H.
John H. What was your favorite video game system at your stint at Blockbuster?
Oh.
Which had the best marketing and writing?
This one's tough. Favorite video game system. I'm going to go PS2, PlayStation 2. I will... Okay, it was also pre-Netflix when I worked there, and my only employee perk, not counting the $7 an hour I made, my only employee perk was I got 5 free rentals a week, and I could use them on video games, and that felt like magic to a 17-year-old.
I can totally see that. Yeah. Well, please give a round of applause for Nick for staying with us here.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Nick. Wonderful
Thank
stuff.
you.